Intelligence in Japan has always been of great importance. Espionage was not only not considered something unworthy, on the contrary, every Japanese being outside the country considered it their duty to spy on something and of course report it to the authorities. Even if the reports were not very valuable, from a stream of seemingly insignificant messages, the Japanese authorities were able to put together a certain mosaic of useful information. So the slogan "Everything is for the benefit of the country Amaterasu," that is, Sun Goddess, was not an empty phrase for the inhabitants of the islands. One of the brightest representatives of the security community was General Kenji Doihara. From the bottom. Lawrence of Manchuria. This nickname was given to Doihara not by anyone but by representatives of the British intelligence services, by analogy with the famous English spy adventurer Lawrence of Arabia, Thomas Edward Lawrence, a resident of British intelligence in the Middle East. Kenji Doihara was born in 1883 in the provincial city of Okayama into a simple Japanese family from the urban lower classes. In Japan at that time, a person of low social origin could achieve a successful career only in the army. So the army became a second home for young Doihara. Doihara was a diligent and moderately educated non-commissioned officer. In his first officer rank, he was noticed by his superiors, which became the first step for a young Japanese from a poor family. However, Doihara achieved success and career advancement not only through diligence. He managed to arrange it a little differently, so that his younger 15-year-old sister was noticed by the young prince. The girl quickly became the mistress of a member of the imperial house, which provided Doihara with the opportunity to enter the Higher Military Academy, an institution in which representatives of mainly privileged classes studied and which opened the way to the ranks of generals. The future Japanese Lawrence was interested in foreign languages. First of all, the Chinese language, which over time he mastered perfectly, right down to dialects. These paved the way for him to join the military diplomatic service. As secretary of the military attaché in Beijing, Doihara was able to visit many regions of China. First of all, the novice intelligent officer was interested in Manchuria, several provinces in the northeastern part of the Chinese Empire. Even fellow students at the academy noted Doihara's unsurpassed skills in the art of disguise, transformation, and dissimulation. In a matter of days, he could lose 10 kilograms or more, change his gait, or with the help of makeup completely change his face, becoming a decrepit old man or a teenager. His knowledge of the official Chinese language and several dialects made him a valuable agent for Japanese intelligence. And when his sister became a concubine of the new Emperor Yoshihito, Kenji's position finally became very strong. British intelligence officers wrote in their reports that Japan had a well-functioning tactical intelligence system in China, which helped the Japanese win many military conflicts. Capture of Manchuria. After Japan's victory in Russo-Japanese War of 1904-1905, the position of the Japanese in China strengthened significantly. The entire eastern part of China was infiltrated with Japanese agents. In the early 1920s, Doihara, with his immediate superior, military attaché General Honjo Shigeru, traveled all over the east coast of China. In 1925, Doihara was transferred to the military mission in Manchuria. Even then, Japan began active preparation for the conquest and separation of Manchuria from China. Doihara's activities as an agent of Japanese intelligence in Manchuria were aimed at implementing aggressive plans, which consisted in the annexation of Manchuria. The Manchurian provinces were then ruled by the Chinese general Zhang Zuolin. He had little regard for the central government and pursued an almost independent policy aimed at strengthening the autonomy and essentially the sovereignty of Manchuria. He had a good army, armed with European and American weapons. Formally, Zuolin was an ally of Japan, but in fact, Zuolin was burdened by Japanese influence. His plans were to create an independent Manchu state. Doihara, on the other hand, played his own game. Japan's plans coincided with the intentions of the separatist Zuolin to secede Manchuria from China. Tokyo saw at the head of the puppet state the last Chinese emperor from the Manchu dynasty, overthrown by revolution in 1911 when Ashingaro Puyi, that was the name of the last offspring of the once powerful dynasty of Chinese emperors, was still a child. Doihara established contact with the Black Dragon organization of Chinese renegades, gradually turning it into an extensive intelligence unit in the service of Japanese interests. The Japanese Lawrence widely used opium dens and gambling houses. On his initiative, the Japanese tobacco industry began to produce golden bat cigarettes, which were banned for sale in Japan because they were filled with opium or heroin. With these cigarettes, Doihara's assistants partially paid their agents. The cigarettes were specifically intended for export to China. In 1926, Doihara convinced Zhang Zuolin to go to war with the central government, promising Japan's full support. Zuolin, leaving Manchuria, marched with troops against Beijing. The campaign lasted 2 years with varying success. Zuolin deputy General Wu Zhuchen asked the latter to urgently return to Manchuria. Zuolin left on a train, which was blown up along the way, killing Zuolin. It is clear that this was the work of Japanese saboteurs. Japanese agents successfully weakened China with internal rebellion and civil war. Now it was necessary to create an excuse for Japan's direct intervention in Chinese affairs. On September 18, 1931, Japanese agents committed another sabotage. A subordinate of Colonel Doihara, who by the time had been appointed head of military intelligence of the Kuomintang Army, Lieutenant Kawamoto, caused a train accident in the Mukden area. Since the railroads was the property of Japan, the latter had a dubious but official excuse to invade Manchuria. Next, it was necessary to release the heir to the Qin throne, Puyi, who was under the constant surveillance of the Chinese authorities in the city of Tianjin. On November 10, 1931, several dozen drug-intoxicated Chinese, bribed by Doihara, destroyed a police station in the area where Puyi lived. Doihara, taking advantage of the confusion, managed to take Puyi out of his home and delivered him to a Japanese warship. Another agent of Doihara, the beautiful Kawashima Naniwa, aka Yoshika Kawashima, aka Aishiniguro Shangxi, Manchu princess, was also able to smuggle Puyi's wife, one rank out of Tianjin. A Japanese ship delivered both of them to Manchuria, where Puyi was proclaimed regent. And on March 1, 1934, Puyi was declared emperor of the puppet state of Manchukuo, concocted by the Japanese. By this time, under the leadership of Doihara, an entire secret intelligence empire was working, spreading its tentacles, except already captured Manchuria, to all the coastal cities of eastern China. From this moment on, one of the main tasks of Doihara and his spy empire was preparation for Japanese aggression against the Soviet Union. Nazis. In 1935, the Japanese attaché in Berlin and Doihara's friend Colonel Hiroshi concluded with the head of the German Abwehr military intelligence, Admiral Canaris, an agreement on cooperation between intelligence services, which became part of the famous Anti-Comintern Pact, an alliance of Germany, Italy, and Japan to fight communism, leftist movements, and the USSR. Doihara personally maintained good and friendly relations with the German military attaché in Harbin and subsequently the ambassador Captain Jogit Ott, in order to strengthen German-Japanese friendship and intelligence cooperation. However, the Japanese genius of intelligence and master of sabotage did not suspect that Ott was leaking information to his friend Richard Sorge, a Soviet intelligence officer who successfully operated under the pseudonym Ramsey. Soviet intelligence long ago paid attention to this nimble Japanese resident and took him under surveillance. In Soviet reports, Doihara went by pseudonym European, perhaps because he spoke several European languages. In 1938-1939, Kenji Doihara, having received his first general rank as commander of the 14th Division, participated in the conflicts between the USSR and Japan on Lake Khasan and on the Khalkhin-Gol River, which were unsuccessful for Japan. Nevertheless, Doihara continued to have a successful career, and not only in the field of intelligence. He was appointed Inspector General of Aviation in Manchuria, and in 1941 General Doihara became commander of the 5th Army. At the same time, Kenji continued to oversee the work of Japanese intelligence services throughout almost the entire territory of China, and even beyond its borders. So he created the Indian National Army in Singapore, led by the nationalist Chandra Bose. This underground army, consisting of several groups of commandos, waged, as they would now say, an extremist and terrorist war against the British colonial authorities. In addition to espionage and terrorist activities, Doihara was also one of the largest drug lords in Far East Asia. He used drugs both as currency to pay off agents hooked on drugs, as a weapon against the enemies of the Mikado, as a means of replenishing the Japanese treasury, and to enrich himself, of course. The Japanese Lawrence did not forget about the Soviet direction. Here, Doihara made extensive use of Russian White Guard immigrants. More than 5,000 former Russian officers, privates of the White Guards, and civilians collaborated with Japanese intelligence. Doihara was the creator of the Russian fascist movement, formed from the white immigrants. Many intelligence forces of the Kwantung Army were sent to the espionage and sabotage war against the USSR. However, here Doihara and his agents were much less successful. In 1943, Doihara became commander of the Eastern Army, second in rank after the commander-in-chief of the Kwantung Army. In 1944, Lawrence of Manchuria was appointed commander of the 7th Front, covering Singapore, Indonesia, and a number of islands in the Pacific Ocean. In early 1945, he returned to Japan, where he was appointed Chief Inspector of Military Training, one of the most prestigious military positions. In September 1945, at the end of the empire, after the suicide of the Field Marshal Sugiyama, Doihara headed the first command, responsible for the defense of the Japanese islands. However, there was nothing left to defend, since Japan had capitulated. The Allies did not forgive Doihara and his tricks in the espionage confrontation, and the main spy of Japan appeared before the Tokyo Tribunal, which began work on May 3, 1946. Representatives from 11 countries took part in the trial. There were 29 senior military and civilian officials of Japan in the dock. 7 of them, including Kenji Doihara, were sentenced to death. However, Doihara had to wait more than 2 years for the execution of their sentence. On the night of December 22nd, 23rd, Kenji Doihara, the Japanese Lawrence, was hanged in the courtyard of Sugamo prison. This happened in the same place where the Japanese executed Soviet intelligence officer Richard Sorge in November 1944. The execution of the main Japanese criminals was carried out by the American surgeon John Wood, the same person who executed the main Nazi criminals in Germany. Thus ended the life of one of the famous intelligence residents and adventurers of the early and mid-20th century.